This is going to be a training session for how to identify what types of lags you or another player are experiencing. I will try to make this so it applies to more than just our server, however, it's going to apply to mostly Spigot servers. So right off the bat, let's start with one that most of us understand to an extent, ping. So in this server and some other servers, there's going to be a command or a plugin to show you what the ping is. However, if you do not have a plugin, you go into command prompt, and you do ping and there's ways to do like routing, so it'll check where in the United States that there is an interruption. So if you have a really complex issue, you can find out where it's caused and then call your internet provider and fix this issue. I'm only saying that because I've had that happen. So it'll send some packets, it'll tell you the millisecond, it'll say which ones were lost, packet loss, whatever, it'll tell you. Okay, back to the server. Now for ping, it's calculated with two variables. It is how fast the connection is made and how fast the connection can process data. Pretty simple. Okay, moving on to the next thing. Let's go to frames per second. So when you hit F3, if you're using certain keyboards, you have to hit Fn and then F3. On the top left, you can see your frames per second. There's more information you can look up online. You can see how many entities are loaded, where you are, if your graphics card is running. However, my CPU has a built-in graphics, and that's actually pretty darn good. However, other computers don't have that, and sometimes players have their CPU running the full load where their GPU is not, or they don't know how to enable or download drivers. You know, it can get very complex. You also want to make sure you're running the proper Java. That can be a huge performance damage if you have a 64-bit computer running 32-bit Java. Now, it's not going to show your latest Java version. That's because Minecraft has it integrated to prevent bugs. It's not a bad idea, especially when it's in a game and there's no way to hack into a Java flaw through a game. Not really. Okay, back on topic. I'm going to leave that running. So, frames per second lag can be caused by many things. It can be caused by chunk loading, view distance. Now, your eyes can see about 30. If your eyes see the same frame twice, you're going to notice it sometimes. There's many settings you can change to make it so you have higher frames per second. My computer can process well over 120 in this game, but it's set to 60 through the monitor. Okay, let's get into it again. Chunk loading, view distance. The higher the view distance, the more chunks you're loading. The server sends all those chunks loaded in the configuration file of the Spigot server. So even if you have view distance 2, the server is still sending to the client the view distance of 12. It's just not loading the whole range visually, or with the CPU it doesn't process much. So back to that. Alright, so certain areas when you have flowers, you have the water move, and then you have water dripping, lava dripping. You have lighting, you have particles, floating text, signs, chest, anything that stores data. Anything that stores data has to be loaded not only by the client when you get near it, which are settable ranges, it also gets loaded by the server, which can affect ticks per second. We'll get into that in a little bit. But that includes everything from anvils to shulker boxes to signs to mobs to other players on big servers. Anything that stores data, like this trapdoor has a data marker on it that says if it's open or closed. These are actually two entities. It's the item frame and the item inside the frame. So it'll have all that. Corals right now with all the moving effects, animations are pretty laggy. Let's get into weather. So let's just do a typical rainstorm. If you have Optifine installed, which is a client that's like vanilla with extra perks to change different settings, you can disable the rain droplets when they hit the ground. That's actually what causes most players lag, not the actual rain, but the particle effect on the ground. If you have a weaker computer, you're going to have less frames per second. Sometimes your computer will strain for more, especially when you start moving. You'll start noticing when it's being hindered. I won't get into our custom weather plugin right now. You can test that for yourself. I will probably give the permission out so you can do that in a little while. However, don't worry about it for this training session. Okay, that is frames per second. And also that can include heads, banners, all kinds of goodies. Alrighty, let's get to ticks per second. Spigot servers, as a default, have a ticks per second command, which shows your reading for your ticks per second. And if you have essentials with most servers that are small or even medium sized, will have the ticks per second right here posted. Now this won't show us like a static. It'll show like if it's spiked right now, it's going to show it. So if I do it again, it's probably going to, yeah, it's going to stay about what it is. I'll get into that in a little bit. It'll show chunks, entities like what I just mentioned, chests and all that, and then tiles, which I think are like flowers and redstone. You'll have to look into that if you want to really learn about that. But yes, those things slightly affect. The chunks definitely do, the entities kinda do. You can set merging in the Spigot files to less. I mean, not to less, to more, so if there's an item that's 4 blocks away and it merges, you can set it to like 16. It's going to cause weird issues, but it'll all like go through walls, but you can lower the entities. So back on topic. A server normally processes 20 ticks per second. So don't think of it as it'll try to fit in 20 updates per plugin a second. So in every tick, every plugin is processed. So a per tick total will be pretty much the standard. So it's not always the same. So if you run a command, if you're doing something stressful, if it processes it in one tick, it's going to make a spike for a single tick. If it processes it through 160 ticks, it's going to show that lengthy usage rather than a spike. So let's get into that. Again, Spigot servers have some of their own commands. It has timing reports. So let's get into how they work, how to read them. So first off, we have as a default it enabled on startup. So if I needed to see right now if we were having an issue during startup that caused a spike, I can check the console to see if there was an error, or I can see if there was a spike. Right now, I'm not worried about that. We're going to stress the server under a controlled situation. So let's first create a lag, some sort of variable that will make lag. So we're going to stress the weather plugin. If I can remember how to do it. Might not have done that right. Yeah, I had to put set in there. Whoops. Wow, I am just killing it. Alright, let's do a timings reset to start the report. It's going to record. Notice this is multiple types of storms loaded all at once, so I'm going to stress it out as much as I can. So the frames per second right now is pretty much maxed out almost for me. So it's not that bad. For another player it might be. So you got thunderstorm, so you have the lightning targeting system running, you have the hail generators, which is the snowball particles, you have the wind, which is calculating if it needs to blow entities. You have the tornado, which I don't know where it is right now, but it's doing whatever, blowing up someone's house. I don't know. Okay, so let's do a timing report. Now, if you do a too short a report, it will not report. I'm supposed to do paste, but it's still report. It'll still... Oops. It'll still show what's going on. Let's see. Alrighty, right now I am stressing the server out pretty bad. We have an average of 7 players, and the server is... That was a sample of about 46 seconds. Ticks per second was almost 20. So this is ticks per second is modified by, not modified, it is dampened by spikes, and it is by totals. So server load is 58%. It doesn't mean that we have a low data plan, it's just that I just ran a bunch of commands, and we'll get into that. So all this is inclusive rather than exclusive. Now when I say that is variables affect each other, so the weather plugin is going to make the total for Minecraft larger and vice versa. Everything interlocks. So right here you have the total report. It'll say how much CPU of that 58% was being used, the total, if like the total of tick processing, so pretty much the total of data use. So it was using the total of 3.32. They add up. See the totals here, and then you have the spikes. So it'll pretty. I don't know how to read these 100%, but I understand the basics. This is spikes. This is total. The spikes are what players notice the most. If you have a player log in, it's going to create a big spike. If you have a heavy command, not only is it going to have the command as stressful, but somewhere else in the report it'll say, like when it's processing the blocks, or if it's processing something, it'll pop up there as well. So essentially, anything that is stressed, this is Minecraft itself, it'll show pretty much the spikes. Players teleporting creates a spike, because not only does it tell you here, it's not telling you about, which is up higher right above it, chunk loading. A player teleports, they got a low chunks, and the demand is high. The total for how much use it is not bad, but the spikes to get it done are bad. Now I can change the ratios in my files, but it's not that big of a spike. They won't notice completely. They're going to notice a login because you have 53 plugins that are going to want to interact. So yes, this is the timings. It'll show everything, the events. So when someone opens a chest, do chunk load, all kinds of stuff. So if you want to see if a plugin is lagging server side, this is how you do it. If you want to see if it's lagging players frame per second, you teleport to them, make sure they have good connection first, and you say, okay, what is your frames per second? This is how you check it. Compare it to yours. Say, okay, their computer is not that good. Then you tell them get Optifine, and then change the settings to make it so you have a higher frames per second. So that is pretty much it. Again, you have all these commands now. You will want to use them if you have in lag and it's not your connection speed and it's not your frames per second. It is going to be in the timings. If it's not in the timings and it's not your connection speed, it's going to be your frames per second. So the excluding to find which type of lag is cut and dry, really to the point. So I really want you guys to use this rather than spam me on Discord. Hey, I have an issue, I'm lagging, I don't know why. Well, I never was there to do report. Now you can do report. You can say, oh wow, this in spawn the entities were really high, which is not here, but I'm just saying, and that is probably why it's lagging. Oh yes, it is. Okay, male noble, the entity count in this world is very high. How should I fix that? Oh, reduce it by telling the players not to have too many extra chests, not to have excess mobs, or I can change some plugin settings and make it so it's more optimal. You have a problem, you have a solution. It is direct from a tech savvy point. There are ways to diagnose this yourselves, guys, and I really am not always on all the time to help I get stressed out about it because it's really hard to solve these issues when I'm not there. So hopefully this will help you guys. That's the end of this.